How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you to our Season 7, Week 11 around the NCAA recap show. Your Pitt Panthers have a bye week here in Week 11, but that means still plenty of things going on around the NCAA, despite the fact we don't have a game. No real news on the recruiting forefront. We got a number of players we're still intrigued in. Maurice Smith, Jamie Whitfield III are some big ones. Mike Hargrove, Childress, Chad Campbell, a lot of names there that we are in recruiting battles for, and then a number of players locked us out, obviously, and just different players that are available. One big thing we are able to do, we're able to finish scouting our JUCO signee Joe Harris out of Phoenixville, PA. 78 overall at 50% and now at 100%, still 78 overall, but we do get an upgrade there in his impact blocking. So he's 82 blocking across the board, 78 overall. He is going to come in as a junior, but I mean, you get 2 years of this guy at 78 and then maybe, 82, 83 overall. Not going to be as good as Luke Davis, who's starting for us right now with like 94, 96 overall, something of that nature, but still a good player to add to the recruiting class and give us a little bit more options when we are losing 3 starting offensive linemen this offseason. But you can see all the recruits we have in so far. As for the teams that did play this week, you can see Clemson with a win, Duke with a win over NC State, Wake Forest with an upset over Florida State 26-7, Louisville gets to 6 wins in bowl eligibility over BC, North Carolina 42-10 thumping of Virginia, and then in a huge ACC clash, Virginia Tech gets the better of number 23 Miami 45-24. Huge first quarter, 3 touchdowns there for the Hokies, jumps them out in front, and you can see the real issue was Travis Bolden for Miami. 4 interceptions in the game, which really just destroyed any chance Miami might have had at winning. Eddie Henderson with a touchdown. Steve Love decided to run for 2 touchdowns as well, did the Virginia Tech quarterback. So big game there for the Hokies, technically keeping them alive in the ACC title race. I think we'd basically have to lose out in order for them to make it, but still a big win there. And then Florida State, 26-7 losers. They were very, very strong this season, but Parks, their senior quarterback, with a really poor game, under 50% passing, 1 touchdown, under 200 yards. And Roderick Johnson, Wake Forest, get the big victory there. Now, around the NCAA top 25, Houston with a Big 12 upset victory here, 42-30 over Baylor, who had just beat North Carolina in a ranked matchup last week. They fall this week to Houston and Donation Lanou. Big game for him running the football. Manning, their starting quarterback, Jason Manning, passes for 427 and 4 touchdowns. Lanou runs for 131 and a touchdown, and he catches 6 passes for 141 yards and a touchdown. So 270 yards for Lanou and a couple of scores out of the backfield. The guy was an absolute stud. Imagine if he'd have gone to LSU. He's from Louisiana. Imagine if he'd stayed at his home state. They'd be even more stacked than they already are. Penn State 52-21 over Minnesota. Big win for the Nittany Lions. Indiana gets to 7-2 with another win. Michigan throttles Nebraska here. Nebraska, everybody was talking about them. They were a dark horse, 8-1 at the time, and Michigan brings them back down to life. Means and Bigsby with 2 gigantic games for the Wolverines running the football. Steve Tate with just a solid performance, but Means 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Miles Bigsby 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. So over 200 yards and 4 scores for their top receivers there. Iowa State falls at home to Cal in a ranked non-conference battle, 33-29. Michael Robinson had some touchdowns early on, but Anthony Fagan and company with another late touchdown, 4th quarter comeback for the Cal Bears, and they get the victory. 372 yards and 3 touchdowns for Fagan in that victory. Fry, their running back, 100 yards and a touchdown on the ground as he tries to stay in the Heisman race. And I mean, the big reason Iowa State probably lost, Michael Robinson went out with an injury. 157 yards and 2 scores, and then he leaves. Their backup comes in, puts in an admirable effort, runs for 2 touchdowns, but just not able to lead them to victory. Ohio State goes to 8-1 with a huge win over a struggling Michigan State squad. Texas blows out Northern Illinois. Oklahoma State 42-35. They escape an upset at the hands of the Kansas Jayhawks here. Really, really big game. Kansas jumped out to an early lead. Oklahoma State battled back, and then Antoine Burton-Horton with the winning touchdown in overtime. He had 131 yards and 2 scores for the Pokes in that victory. Big game there for him. Auburn 20-6 over Kansas State gets a win there to go to 7-4, knock off a ranked foe. Vanderbilt loses to Florida. And then the game of the week, LSU Alabama. We'll come back and look at that in just a moment, as we also see Florida Atlantic beats unbeaten Western Kentucky 23-17. FAU with the win. Tompkins with the winning touchdown in overtime as the Owls knock off the Hilltoppers. They fall to 8-1 and will likely fall down in the polls. But number 1 versus number 2, Alabama LSU, and this was just an LSU throttling from the beginning. Jacoby Sutton, 3 touchdown passes from Kelikolio. We told you probably a Biletnikoff favorite, and he showed why in this game. He wasn't even at full health. He was probable for this game, so he's playing with an injury. He was unbelievable. Matt Perry, 3 interceptions and only 116 yards passing for Alabama. We know they like to run it. Williams did get his yards, 111 yards on the ground, but no touchdowns for him, really limiting what Alabama could do offensively, while Kelikolio, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns, all to Jacoby Sutton. Bo Brown, their starting running back, also had 14 carries for 150 yards and 2 scores. Kai Brooks Jennings, unbelievable game for him as well, 90-plus yards. He also had 35 yards receiving, while Jacoby Sutton, 9 catches, 92 yards, 3 touchdowns. Rakeem Boone added 78 yards as well. So incredible offensive display for Alabama in the win. Louisiana defensive tackle Tavion Harkins with a 2-sack forced fumble performance, 6 TFLs to get NCAA Defensive Player of the Week. Brian Kimbrough, UNC quarterback, 6 total touchdowns, almost 400 yards, gets him both NCAA and ACC Offensive Player of the Week honors. Brad Thomas, cornerback for Duke, wins Defensive Player of the Week in the ACC Conference. Marquez Gordon now, after their big win over Minnesota, the Penn State quarterback goes up to number 1 in the Heisman race, 25 TDs against 7 picks. He's also a running threat as well, which is certainly going to help his case. 8 touchdowns on the ground and over 600 yards for the redshirt sophomore quarterback. Williams still in and amongst the Heisman contenders. Robert Fry's right there. Bo Brown, 150-yard performance and a couple of scores in that win over Bama, gets his name into contention. Justin Martin, Ball State senior running back, right there as well. 127 yards in his last performance. But interesting to see a quarterback now atop the title race. Oklahoma, no action this week, and Taylor Savage falls out of the top 5. And with the off week, the Panthers do still get a bump. They jump up to number 2 in the polls. LSU number 1. Of course, with Alabama losing, they fall back to number 6. So a little bit of jumbling around. Pitt actually jumps from 5 to 2, though. So they leapfrog over Penn State and Cincinnati and take Alabama's slot in the poll. So 3 unbeatens right there at the top. Then a lot of one-loss teams. Notre Dame hanging out there at number 7 somehow. But then a ton of one-losses all the way through number 11. Then you get the 2 losses. Ball State into the polls for the first time this year now. They're sitting at 9-0. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that they're going to have any chance to get into the college football playoff just because of their strength of schedule. But still impressive to see Ball State sitting there unbeaten 9 weeks into the season, led by, we know, their star running back, Justin Martin. But BCS, if it were still in place today, you'd have LSU and Pitt in the BCS championship game. But if you look at the top 4 as it stands right now, you'd have LSU 1, Pitt 2, Cincy 3, Penn State 4. That would be a tasty Final Four with an opportunity to play for the college football playoff. But Oklahoma's there with 1 loss. Washington's there with 1 loss. If any of those teams goes through and wins their conference championship and makes it all the way through and ends up 12-1, that's obviously going to be a whole new animal to see how things shake out. Pitt is just 1 win away pretty much from clinching the Coastal Division title because they have a tiebreaker over Virginia Tech. If they beat North Carolina, they'd have a tiebreaker over the Tar Heels as well. So 1 more win in the Coastal is going to give that to the Panthers. And then in the Atlantic Division, Clemson already has that sewn up, done, dusted. They will be in the ACC Conference Championship game as well. So when you look at the playoff, it's interesting to see here because Alabama, after losing to LSU, if LSU wins out and loses in their conference championship game, it would be interesting to see what the pollsters would do. You'd have 11-1 Bama, let's assume they win out. You'd have 12-1 LSU, let's assume they win and then lose their conference championship game, maybe to South Carolina. Then you could theoretically have 11-2 or 12-1 South Carolina because they do still have Clemson to play this year. So that'll be an end of the season game. You'll have Pitt, where Pitt is right now, 9-0. Theoretically, they could be 12-1, 13-0, something of that nature. You got Clemson, who could be 12-1, 13. The best they can do is 12-1. They could be 12-1, 11-2. You got Oklahoma could go to 12-1. Washington in the Pac-12 could go and win out and be 12-1. Penn State in the Big Ten could go 12-1. Ohio State, if Penn State slips up and loses, Ohio State could be 12-1. There's a number of different teams that could be in and around the Final Four, and definitely this year, among many years, this could be a big year where somebody deserving ends up being left out. But some big games on the docket. South Carolina, we just mentioned, they could go 12-1 theoretically if they went out, beat Clemson, beat the SEC championship game. They're 8-1 right now, but they have a tough matchup against number 12 Florida, who's sitting there at 7-2 and trying to make their own mark for a division title. Big game between those two teams. Also, you have Louisiana back on the winning track, 7-1 now, taking on Georgia State. That's actually a big game for the group of 5, 7-2 Georgia State. Texas, Oklahoma State is a massive showdown. Giovanni Perry in Texas taking on Antoine Byrne-Horton and Oklahoma State. Two really, really good scoring offenses. Oklahoma State, the big thing that they do is they take the ball away at will. Plus 15 turnover differential. That is best in the country, and that could be huge in this matchup. Stanford taking on USC. Tulsa taking on Cincinnati here. You have the Bearcats currently sitting at 8-0 right now, number 3 in the country, taking on the Golden Hurricane. Baylor, Texas Tech. It's going to be a good matchup. Louisville, Clemson, of course. Louisville 6-3. They're just looking to play spoiler. They're not going to catch Clemson in the Atlantic Division, but any team from here on out just wants to ruin Clemson, the number 1 offense, number 1 passing offense in the country's not perfect season, but very, very impressive season and run for the college football playoff. Potentially Bama wants to get back to winning ways, taking on Mississippi State here. I would expect Bama to do just that, but it should be good showdown. Iowa State, Oklahoma, we didn't mention either, as another really good Big 12 matchup that we'll see. And then for your Pitt Panthers, they're going to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Very talented team. UNC has underachieved, I think, for their talent level this year. They're 7-3, 4-2 in conference. They do have that loss to Baylor in non-conference play as well. But the Tar Heels are very, very talented. They're not a team the Panthers can overlook. The big thing for the Panthers here, number 1, they have a ton of recruits visiting for this game, so it's going to be a huge recruiting showcase for the Panthers, as well as it's senior night. The Panthers' last 2 games of the regular season against Miami and against Syracuse are going to be away from home. That means this is senior night for the Panthers, so everybody is going to be geared up for this showdown. The Panthers losing 13 seniors off of the roster this year, and they're going to want to have a big, big game. There's no doubt about that. But you look at North Carolina, they lost to Clemson, obviously, in convincing fashion, but then they lose to Baylor by 3, and they lose to Wake by 3. You flip those 2 scores around, North Carolina's a team that could be 10-1 right now. So they definitely have talent. Kimbrough's been very, very good for them at quarterback this year, his first year starting for the Tar Heels. Devin Blake, we know how good he is. He could be in the Heisman race. He's been in and around the top 5 at different points this season. 13 touchdowns, 977 on the ground. He'll probably go over 1,000 yards for the season in this matchup. They're very, very impressive and a very well-rounded team, as we'll see. For your Panthers, C.J. Kirk looking to hit 20 touchdowns on the season in this game. Davion Reynolds over 800 yards so far. Ceno Rogers, as we know, is a great dual threat player who can really, and that's the big thing. You look at Reynolds and Rogers, both last games, as well as C.J. Kirk's. They impact the game in so many different ways. Reynolds actually had more receiving yards than rushing in that game, and Kirk had almost 100 yards rushing as well. North Carolina will be impacted by a few injuries in this game. Stacey Carter, their center, broken tailbone, still he's recovering from. He'll be out for another couple weeks, and Terrence James, who's actually their backup right guard, he'll miss this game as well. So one starting lineman will be out for the Tar Heels. But when you look at their team, they're still good. They have 5 players at 90 overall or better, including their quarterback, their running back, and their top receiver. They have a middle linebacker duo that is absolutely incredible, and they just have a lot of talent. You look at their team, tons of 80-plus overalls, very, very good. Even their backup quarterback's very good. Kimbrough, though, redshirt senior, came into the program this year, and he's been, as advertised, just a very good pocket passer. Doesn't run well at all, but he moves the ball around the field very, very well. 94 accuracy, so you can expect him likely to protect the football this game. Junior Elliott Long, expect him to be their starter next year. Still very good player and is a great backup option for them. Devin Blake's unbelievable. He's going to be an NFL draft pick this year. This guy is a monster. going to hit 1,000 yards this year. He's been very, very good. And he's a guy that if they feed him, we've seen that the Panthers have had struggles with teams that run the ball very effectively, although they did a good job shutting down UCLA earlier this year. And Derek Gray is a sophomore, 92 speed, 86 overall, true sophomore. He's fantastic as well. Great backup option. He's going to take the rock next season. He has 400-plus yards this season as well. A trio of really good receivers for North Carolina here. Steve Smith is a great option. Zach Kunu I really, really like. And then Rogers as well in the slot is just a great possession option. He catches everything that comes around him. Zach Curtis, a true freshman, 81 overall, 92 speed. That guy's a monster. So a lot of really talented players that North Carolina can farm the ball out to when they need to. And they have a great tight end as well. Barry Williams, really good receiving tight end, 85 overall. So a lot of options for the Tar Heels offensively and a lot of threats to watch out for. Offensive line wise, Cleveland's okay, 79 overall. Ellis Fontaine, redshirt sophomore, is unbelievable, 87 overall. He's a very, very talented player. They're going to miss Stacey Carter in this game. Expect Madden Humphrey, the true freshman, to have to start. That's an area where the Panthers could really take advantage through the middle of the field. Aaron London, 85 overall at right guard, is solid and will probably help with double teams on the likes of Malachi Bordeaux. And then Calvin Fletcher out wide against Pitt leading sacker Jalen Hills should be a great matchup as well. Not a particularly imposing area for North Carolina is their front three, because they do play a 3-4, and that's where you'll see where North Carolina really imposes their will on you. Obviously, Darnell Meeks, their leading sacker, 4 sacks on the season. Not a huge total, but he just clogs up the middle of the field. He's fantastic. But where they really scare you is at linebacker. They play a 3-4, and their linebackers are unbelievable. Trey Jackson is very good. Gonzalez right behind him is great. Their middle linebackers are insane. Kavarius Black, one of the best players in college football, and he's just a sophomore. The guy's unbelievable. 90 overall. And then Mac Ball, true freshman. This guy is a monster. 82 overall, is a true freshman. Him and Kavarius Black, they're going to be back next year to continue wreaking havoc on ACC offenses. They're both fantastic players. And then Johnny Garcia, he is a senior. He's a guy that we actually went after recruiting wise, 5 seasons ago, because he's a 5th-year senior. Unbelievable player, really talented. And that's the thing, when you're a 5th-year senior, you just have time to develop. I remember when we went after him way back when, he was a 3-star, probably 60-some overall, and he's blossomed into an incredible, incredible player, impact player for them defensively. Corners, definitely somewhere we can exploit. Their corners aren't particularly talented. Chris Fuller's okay. Vashon Kraft is decent. Desi Stanley, again, all you can say about their entire cornerback crew, they're all decent. They don't have a corner worse than 77 overall, but they don't have anyone better than 83 overall, and that's with 7 cornerbacks. So pretty much you can throw almost anybody out there, and you know what you're going to get out of this UNC corner field. And so maybe we can take advantage of that, especially with some of the speed and the skill guys we do have. Pierre King, though, unbelievable player. He's kind of underachieved this year. No picks, 3 deflections, not a ton of tackles, but he is a likely maybe first-round pick in the NFL draft this upcoming year at free safety. He's unbelievable. Fantastic player is Pierre King. And then Fontenot, their strong safety. When we played, last year, he was incredible. He's got a pick 6 on the season this year. He's a guy that he just has a nose for the football. He's not highly rated, but he's very, very talented. Was unbelievable last year. I remember him winning a couple of ACC Player of the Week awards even as a true freshman. He was really, really talented. So I think that's going to make this North Carolina team, really, really tough out in this matchup. The Panthers are going to have to be on their game to try and shut down the Tar Heels, and it should be a great matchup. And what that's going to do is that's going to really help out this Steel City showcase, because take a look at all the prospects we have coming in to visit this week. Mark Childress, James Oliver, Maurice Smith, Andrew Burrell, Ken Keller, Ronnie Richard, Mike Hargrove, Jamie Whitfield III, Chad Campbell, Tim Burrell Jr. I mean, that is an incredible lineup. You got Childress, who's an offensive lineman. You got Oliver and Smith, who are defensive linemen. Smith is a top prospect in the country. I think he's maybe number 127 overall. Burrell's just to help out offensively. He's a quarterback. We don't really need him. Ken Keller, a safety. Jamie Whitfield III, linebacker, is a huge, huge target that we're going after. He's a 3-star, but he just looks to be unbelievable. We'd love to bring him in, and I think this game's going to be a great showcase for that. So, as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen when we take on North Carolina next week. Hail to Pitt, and as always, we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.